generación. En el municipio de Tapalpa, Jalisco, se trata de Eric N., quien es señalado como miembro fundador del cártel Jalisco Nueva Generación.
September 5th, 2022 was a day to be remembered in the history of Mexico, especially Jalisco, as the law enforcement authorities of the country had gotten their hands on one of the most wanted criminals and cartel leaders of this generation, El-85. Wanted for his ever-growing list of crimes, El-85 had managed to slip away from his sentence once in 2012, but this time, the authorities had strong proof and reasons to press heavy charges on him. Eric Valencia Salazar, known in the crime world as El-85, was a ruthless leader of the Nueva Plaza Cartel, or the New Plaza Cartel, and a suspected Mexican drug kingpin. Behind his ominous alias, Valencia Salazar was a cool-headed mastermind that could easily rally up cartel members to create criminal organizations. He went on to take advantage of the rifts in bigger cartels and created his own army in 2 different instances, proving his skills in leadership and negotiation. With his power and influence, he managed to become one of the biggest narcotics smugglers and a prominent threat to El Mencho. Even though he was arrested in 2022, the tales of his supreme leadership and inhuman brutality will continue to make the rounds in the dark history of Mexico for centuries. In this video, we will tell you the story of how Valencia Salazar rose to power and what contributed to his downfall. Eric Valencia Salazar was born in Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico. His real birth year is unconfirmed, but he's believed to be born in either March 1977 or November 1982. He began his career in 2003 with the Milenio Cartel, the organization which CJNG originated from. He was in a leadership position in the organization. In later years, he also became a senior leader in CJNG, or the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. Valencia Salazar was very smooth in his operations. He carried multiple aliases and kept a low profile, so much so that he had a clean record and no arrests for arranging organized attacks throughout the years. However, the brutal attacks directed by this leader did not go unnoticed by the law enforcement authorities, and they marked him as a violent criminal in their records. Law enforcement officials also traced Valencia Salazar's connection to Zhenli Yigong, a Chinese-Mexican businessman. Gong was a suspected narcotics dealer for the Sinaloa cartel. In 2007, law enforcement officers searched Zhenli Yigong's house and found $205 million in cash. But due to a lack of proper evidence in the connection, the matter is still under investigation. This event is important because it was the first time his name had appeared in a police record. So how did El-85 rise to power? The Milenio Cartel was one of the dominant cartels at that time, but it had slowly begun to disintegrate due to their leaders being arrested. Valencia Salazar saw an opportunity to take over the cartel when his superiors were slowly being removed from the ranks, one by one. Oscar Nava Valencia, or El Lobo, leader of the Milenio Cartel, was arrested in Guadalajara in October 2009 during a gun battle with the Mexican army. Juan Carlos Nava Valencia, also known as El Tigre, and his sister, Jacqueline Patricia Nava Valencia, were arrested in May 2010. Both of them were charged for illegal narcotics trafficking from South and Central America and into the United States. A few months later in the same year, Ignacio Coronel Villarreal, who was a superior to El Lobo, was killed in a fight with the Mexican army. This created an unrest in the cartel, and it started breaking off into smaller pieces. Valencia, Martin Arzola Ortega, or El-53, and Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, or El Mencho, fought for control of the Milenio Cartel after Villarreal's murder. They managed to gather enough people to form their own organization. On the other hand, Elpidio Mojaro Ramirez, also known as El Pilo, and Victor Manuel Torres Garcia, also known as El Paparin, gathered the other part of the cartel and started leading their organization. Both organizations were equal in power and expertise, and soon the question of dominance arose. Valencia and Ramirez's groups began to fight each other and created 2 different cartels in 2009 to overpower the others. The faction led by Ramirez was called La Resistencia, and the one led by Valencia and El Mencho was called Los Torquidos. Valencia's group of recruits went on to become one of the strongest and most powerful narcotics cartels in the world in later years, which we will discuss shortly. After splitting from the mother cartel, Valencia's people carried out a series of organized attacks against the other cartels, businesses, and citizens. to initiate dominance and sustain it. They wanted to make their presence known to the world, so they began to brand their activities with brutality. Soon they began overpowering Ramirez and his platoon. To resist them, La Resistencia shook hands with Los Zetas, another cartel that was well known for its inhuman violence. Together, they created another monstrous criminal organization that put all of their past records of violence to shame. Ramirez directed all his manpower towards capturing Jalisco, as that's where Los Torquitos was headquartered and operated from. Los Torquitos won, and soon created the CJNG, or Jalisco New Generation Cartel, and increased their power in western Mexico. Valencia Salazar resumed his role as a senior leader in the organization. His primary job was to organize attacks on rival cartels, such as La Resistencia and Los Zetas, through the 2010s. He was also in charge of narcotics delivery for CJNG from China and Colombia to Mexico. Under the reign of Eric Valencia Salazar and El Mencho, CJNG was going through their golden era, but suddenly, El-85 was arrested in March 2012 by Mexican law enforcement. He was captured in Guadalajara, the state capital of Jalisco, with an accomplice who was likely his chief lieutenant. They had firearms and heavy ammunition in their possession. Law enforcement captured them after a gun battle. The members of the cartel were upset with the sudden arrest of one of their leaders, and they didn't sit idle. CJNG retaliated and created havoc, turning the entire city of Guadalajara into a riot zone. They initiated a set of coordinated attacks, a part of which was to set 25 vehicles on fire in the middle of the city in broad daylight. But they were unsuccessful to save Valencia Salazar from the grips of authorities. Authorities claimed that he had participated in the murder of 35 members of the rival Zetas cartel. He had their bodies dumped in 2 trucks beneath the bridge. Many say there were some innocents in these 35 people, and they had nothing to do with Los Zetas. After the atrocious riot and fire in the city, the cartel later posted apologies on the walls of the city announcing that they did this because they wanted their protest to be heard by the authorities. After serving 5 years in prison, in 2017, Valencia Salazar was suspiciously released from prison. Authorities declared that there was an error in the procedure of his detainment, and they had insufficient evidence to keep him locked further. Many claim that corrupt judges worked with the CJNG to release Salazar. However, some believe that they were forced to release him because of the atrocities demonstrated by the cartel every day. While El-85 was in prison, El Mencho and his men turned CJNG into one of the most powerful cartels in the world, rivaling the Sinaloa cartel. They were the masters of substance trafficking and daily violence, and no one could possibly beat them. After coming out of prison, Valencia Salazar was no longer a part of CJNG. No one knows what made him leave the cartel, as he was an experienced and diligent member who knew how to do his job while maintaining cover. But it's suspected that he had some sort of bitterness towards CJNG, which prevented him from joining. It's also possible that the existing leaders didn't want him around. Soon he created a separate organization to fight CJNG. El-85 rallied recruits and created the New Plaza cartel, along with a former CJNG colleague, Enrique Sanchez Martinez, also known as El Cholo. They started their operations in Guadalajara, Jalisco in 2018 and wreaked havoc in the town. CJNG had presence in all of Mexico and had sprawling operations in foreign lands. However, New Plaza cartel only had presence in Jalisco and a few nearby states. The dark times in Jalisco began the very moment the New Plaza cartel began operating. Their thirst for revenge against CJNG and El Mencho started many wars, and the list of casualties kept growing every day. In the next 2 years, Mexican authorities traced several mass graves and torch houses directly to this new deadly cartel. It was suspected that the bodies belonged to the rival cartels, one of them being CJNG. In 2019, police found 2 Plaza Ran grave sites close to each other. Both of them had human bones and other remains, and the numbers ranged from 50. In 2020, authorities uncovered corpses that could amount to nearly 130 people in a different location.
They found 131 corpses worth of remains, which is a record for the state of Jalisco.
The numbers were never so high before. Jalisco had become a living hell and had touched a record due to the high number of remains found in mass graves. In fact, a good percentage of all disappearances in Mexico between 2018 and 2020 occurred in Jalisco and were conducted by Salazar and his cronies. In 2017, the U.S. State Department offered a $5 million reward in exchange for information that could lead them to L-85. They also released a statement charging Valencia Salazar with drug trafficking offenses, dating back to the beginning of his career in 2003. The bounty amount was indeed lucrative and was successful in helping capture L-85. The Mexican army re-arrested Eric Valencia Salazar in September of 2022. Police arrested him in Tapalpa, Jalisco, with 2 associates. They had heavy ammunition, 750 grams of methamphetamine, and almost 1,000 fentanyl pills. Enough proof to put a heavy charge on him. The arrest was carried out in the morning and kept confidential initially, but was announced later that day. This catch definitely redeemed the reputation of the Mexican president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. He had been criticized heavily due to the lack of action against the cartel brutalities throughout his first few years of tenure. Here's an interesting catch. The Mexican grapevine suspects that El Mencho was behind the detention of L-85 in 2012. He is suspected to have tipped the law enforcement on the whereabouts and activities of L-85, which led to his prompt arrest. But what could have been his motive? He had millions of dollars in his pocket, and the amount was growing every day. $5 million was not that significant to him, so it's highly unlikely that he would get L-85 arrested to collect the bounty. So what led him to make that move? Many suspect that he was worried about the New Plaza cartel taking over the CJNG in the upcoming years, and so he removed his competition when he found the chance. This brings us to the next question. What happened to the New Plaza cartel? In 2021, the cartel had already sustained a hit when El Cholo was kidnapped, tortured, and murdered, allegedly by the members of the CJNG. El Cholo had expressed his desires to work with Mexican authorities to control the demonic actions of CJNG, which led to his demise. His body was dumped in a park, wrapped in plastic, with a signboard taped on the corpse that called him a traitor. And now, with the arrest of Valencia Salazar, it was uncertain who would lead the New Plaza cartel, putting the cartel's future at risk. L-85 survived the fall of many cartels and still managed to convince people to fight for a new cause. He even created 2 strong organizations that ruled Mexico for years, dealing with narcotics, leading organized attacks, and taking the lives of innocents. He did it all. Now that he's captured, it's unlikely that he can slip away easily this time. The streets of Mexico are still rampant with cartel wars. People are losing their lives every day, some due to association with the deadly cartels, and some due to being in the wrong place at the wrong time. No one knows when these innocent people will be able to live a life without all the monstrosity, but the arrest of L-85 will surely help contain the brutality to some extent, and this could be the beautiful beginning of a safer future. What do you think will become of the New Plaza cartel now that the founders have been removed from the ranks? Do you think it'll disintegrate? Let us know in the comments below. Subscribe to our channel and press the bell to get notified of future uploads. See you soon with the next exciting story.